Hey everyone, welcome to Pop Culture Pastor, where we look at movies, music, comics, and more from the perspective of faith. Welcome everyone. I'm Chris Perry, your self-proclaimed pop culture pastor. I'm so excited to be starting this podcast, and I'm so glad that you're listening to it. It's an idea that I've had in mind for a long time, and finally getting it going, so I'm glad you're here. You may be wondering, okay, well, who are you, and why do you think you should proclaim yourself the pop culture pastor? Well, I've been in ministry for about 15 years for most of all my career. That's always what I've done, always what I've wanted to do. I currently serve at a church in Wichita, Kansas. I've worked at churches in Oklahoma and Texas and even across the sea in England. So this has always been, what I wanted to do with my life. As much as I love it sometimes, and sometimes it's difficult. But this is what I've committed myself to. And my other main passion is pop culture, things like movies and comics and music. I often tell people that I like to read. That's one of my hobbies, and I read about an equal amount of comic books and theology. And so I wanted to bring those two things together. I know I'm not the first person to have that idea, but it's always, I think, insightful to look at pop culture through a theological lens, as I mentioned at the beginning. And so usually the format of the show is we'll have a topic every week from music or movies or TV or comics. And usually I'll have a guest with me, and we'll discuss that. Sometimes it'll just be solo. And we're going to end every week with something I'm calling Pop Culture Consolations and Desolations. You'll have to stick around to see what exactly that means. But enough about me. You're going to hear a conversation I had with my friend Nick. And before I actually get started on the podcast properly, I just want to thank Nick for, I would say he is the godfather of the Pop Culture Pastor podcast, since he's got his own successful podcast and has helped me a lot through all this and gotten me some equipment. So Nick's one of my best friends, and I really appreciate you. So let's get to my conversation about the Trinities. All right, well, our guest today is Nick Miller. Nick was at one time a youth minister at the same church that I now work at. We went to school together, and now he's in videography with Wild Oak Films. Nick, you want to say a little bit about just your history with the church, and then your history, your pop culture interests? Why are you the person I'm talking to today, I guess?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure why I'm the one that you're talking to. No. I grew up in church. It was, I joke. I think this isn't a joke, but literally I was born on a Wednesday and I was at church on Sunday. Like that's kind of how my family has been. My parents have always been leaders in church. My dad's been an elder. My mom taught the, fourth and fifth grade class for forever. And then when I was in high school, I went to a youth rally and I said, oh, I want to do this. This looks fun. This looks cool. And so I decided that I was going to be a youth minister, and I went to college for that. And I did that for 11 years, full time. I got into wedding videography about 6 years into being a minister, and that ended up, becoming a passion of mine. And so I left the ministry job to do that full time. So that's what my day job is. As far as getting into pop culture, comic book nerdery kind of stuff, I'm trying to think exactly when it happened, but it's always been something that has been like fringe interest of me. Like I remember the 90s X-Men cartoon, that was always, don't we all, if you're of the, old millennial age group, right? Like it was
elder millennials. That's us.
The elder millennial. I like that phrase. Yeah. That was always something that was really cool. And then I think it kind of sparked again whenever the, was it 1999 X-Men?
2000, I think.
1999, 2000, somewhere in there, that came out. So that was always really exciting, and that's kind of what reintroduced me. And then I started playing this tabletop board game with my friend Adam called HeroClix. And how it was kind of described to me is chess, but with superheroes. So you collect these little miniature figures, and then you go do battle on this board, and there's dice. It's really nerdy and stuff.
Sounds very nerdy.
And
I know. I'm actually sad that I missed out on that phase of
yeah, it was
life with you.
You would have really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think maybe we should try to find someone play that. But anyway, I was playing with all these characters, and I wanted to like get into comic books. So I kind of did it like, I think a lot of people got into the game because of the comic books, but I was kind of the reverse of that. And so that was about the time when they released Marvel Unlimited. And so I picked that up, and I off of my friend Kevin, he suggested Ultimate Spider-Man, because he really likes Spider-Man. Spider-Man was his character. I was more of an X-Men guy, but I was like, I don't know where to start. And so started reading that. And then I just started picking up some X-Men stuff. And I'm trying to remember where I started reading with it. It was a little bit later on, early thousands X-Men. Anyway, just started reading everything.
Hey, just as a plug real quick, you can follow me on Instagram at Pop Culture Pastor, and I have a series that I did some this year about how to get into comics. And so I talk about things like Marvel Unlimited. It's basically like Netflix, a subscription service for Marvel comics where you can just read basically anything, all their back issues, and new stuff comes out, a few months after. But yeah, it's kind of overwhelming to figure out how to get into comics and that sort of stuff. If you're interested because of the movies, go check that out. So speaking of plugs, do you want to plug yourself and where people can find you and what you do? I mean, having you on my podcast really kind of helps me because you have much more of an online presence already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big into, if you want to follow me, on Instagram, I am Nick Miller is my Instagram account, though I'm not very.
Hey, like that guy in that show.
Yeah, exactly. I had the name first, though. So if you want to follow me along there, I post like 3 times a year on that account.
Cool.
So,
but also your videography gets a few more views than that.
Yeah. Wild Oak Films is our wedding video company, but I'm not sure how many of your
it doesn't really overlap.
It does not overlap.
You never know.
But you never
People
know.
have multiple interests. But our focus here is the overlapping interests of theology and nerdery, pop culture. It won't always be super nerdy stuff, but a lot of times it will. And today it's going to be pretty nerdy in both directions because we're talking about the idea of the Trinity, the Christian Trinity, and then Trinities in pop culture. So real quick, we'll just take a couple minutes and summarize the doctrine of the Christian Trinity, right? That God exists as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Very self-explanatory. God is 3, but God is also 1. I don't know. As you tried to understand this, or you were a pastor for many years. How would you explain it to other people? Are there any analogies that you found helpful to explain the Trinity?
The one that I always came back to that I know isn't perfect, but it was always that of an apple. Where you have the skin, the meat, and the seed, and how they are all an apple, but they're different parts of an apple. I know that some of that falls apart, with depending on your theology and what you kind of think about things. And is the seed really an apple? And is the skin really an apple? And
an egg. I've heard the same. Right, the shell, the yolk, and then the white. Right, like it's all egg, and yet they're distinct. But there's a YouTube video. I can't remember what it's called, but you search for St. Patrick bad analogies. And it's St. Patrick in Ireland trying to explain the Trinity to a couple of people there, using something like a 4-leaf clover or 3-leaf clover, sorry. Any analogy that you use pretty quickly becomes heresy at some point, something that the church declared as a heretical view, things like modalism or partialism and, again, Arianism. We're not going to get into explaining all those sort of things.
That's today. Good because I don't know if I understand.
I studied those in grad school and I've forgotten most of it, but it's a mystery. My favorite one that I've come up with that I'm sure still is heretical if you take it too far is the idea of coffee, because you have the liquid itself, you have the mug, and then you have the heat, right, or the energy of the coffee. So that God is the coffee, Christ is the mug, right? It's the container that holds it, and can be in different forms, and the Spirit is like the heat of it that you can see coming off the top, or the energy from the caffeine. Again, I know you take those and separate them out. It probably is heretical, but what I like about that is the idea that the true experience is drinking it, right? And so it's engaging in the process of drinking coffee rather than separating it out. That's where you're really experiencing something. And so this idea that God is Trinity, it is a dynamic thing. Some of the ideas that have been helpful for me is the idea of social Trinitarianism, the idea that basically God is love, right? This foundational idea that we see in Scripture. And so love is a relationship. Love requires someone else to love, right? If God is love, God somehow has to be community for there to be love. And so it's this continual outpouring, this self-emptying that exists in God's own nature. Richard Rohr has talked a lot about this, and he's been helpful in how I understand it, the idea of like a divine dance, that it's always moving in this circle. So how do you depict that? Have you seen any ways, Nick, that you can depict the Trinity that work well, or how can those be problematic?
Can you really depict something like this in a picture? Because
I think that's part of the question. That's probably another reason why it's a mystery and it's difficult. And obviously, we're also on a podcast, which is a audio medium. So, like, here, look at all these different images. Doesn't work too well.
It's definitely because whenever you separate them out, then does it lose something if you're talking about the Trinity? Mm-hmm. Like it's one thing if you're here's God the Father, and we're talking specifically about that, and you're like, okay, here's this picture of God, or here's this picture of Jesus, or here's this picture of the Spirit. But whenever you combine the three, can you put them in three different bodies and it still be the Trinity? But then if you combine them all, then it's the Trinity. But then does it lose its like individuality that all those things have? So
right. I mean, that's the core.
Right.
Mystery is a good word here. Right?
Definitely.
It's a mystery, so you can always understand it more, but never fully. And so, you want to. They're three persons, but one God. I think one substance is the language that the early church leaders would use. So you can find different pictures where it's three different people basically, or you have like God with the white beard, and then Jesus as Jesus usually depicted in the Spirit as a dove or something of that nature. Then you get into like, okay, well, 2/3 are men clearly, and then we're not sure about the dove. And so it's interesting. I'll probably do a series on Instagram again if you follow me there, and you can look at some different images of the Trinity and see how different people have tried to depict this mystery. One of the most famous, though, is an icon by Rublev of the Trinity. And it takes actually the story from Genesis 18, where there's three visitors who come to Abraham, and we're told that it's actually the Lord, right? So the Lord, God is appearing to Abraham as three visitors. And so it's a pretty obvious place where Christian interpreters later would come back and say, hey, look, it seems to be pointing towards this mystery already. And so in this icon, you have three, they're angels in the story, but so you have three people sitting around a table, and they're kind of looking at each other in a circle, right? One is looking at the other, and then they're looking at the next. And it is that divine dance, that circle that I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that's really interesting about it, and it appeals to a lot of people, is they all kind of look the same, and yet they all look a little different. They seem a little, you can't tell if they're men or women, and the expression on their face, again, you just have to see it. I know this is not the best thing to be talking about on a podcast, but the expressions of just kind of love and peace on their face is really amazing. But why are we talking about this? Well, if you want an example of what that icon looks like, you can look at the cover image for this podcast. So if you've seen this, you can look at it right now. I took that icon, the Rublev Trinity icon, and I replaced the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, which is also probably heretical, but apologies. I'll pray for forgiveness later. But But so this kind of moves into the pop culture side of this. Of it's a very common thing that we see in culture and media of sometimes called the rule of three, right? Where you have three characters as kind of the core, and they interact with each other. And I used these DC superheroes because they're often referred to as the Trinity. So if you think about that, could you line them up, right? If you have Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, well, which is which? How would you think of them corresponding?
That's a really good question, and Chris and I actually talked about this. I don't know, a couple of years ago, a long time ago.
I've had the idea for this and this podcast for a long time,
and I remember we had like a really good discussion about this, and then Chris was like, "No, we can't talk about this now because we need to do it for the podcast." But it's been so long that I kind of forgot.
Yeah, that was intentional, not just laziness.
Right. I forgot what it was, or what I said. And as I'm sitting here thinking about it, it's the Superman character to me is either that would represent God the Father or Christ because of the power that he has, the invulnerability that he has, the goodness that he is.
Right. So Superman is like the Father because he is more powerful.
I'm gonna go. Okay. I'm gonna just go in. As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I would put Superman as the Christ figure.
Okay.
In how I'm thinking through this, and if you watch specifically Zack Snyder's movies and stuff, he is very much depicted as a Christ figure. All this coming from a different world, coming to Earth, saving the Earth, that sort of stuff.
Right, sent by his father.
That sort of thing.
It's in Man of Steel. I think it's in the 70s Superman movie. It's a pretty common idea of Superman as a Christ figure.
Yeah, very common. Which leads me to, I would say that Wonder Woman would then probably fall into the Holy Spirit version. She does stand for justice and power and stuff. It's also, there's a lot of peace with her and I don't know, maybe there's just something in my mind that won't let me say that Wonder Woman could be God the Father because she's like, I don't know if that plays into it at all. Yeah. But as I was sitting here thinking about this, I was like, I really like putting Batman as God the Father figure. Mm-hmm. Because
he's angry.
Well, he is angry and he's going to smite you but not use guns.
Not how I understand God the Father, no. But that is the stereotype.
But I was sitting here thinking about it, and I'm really thinking of Batman as the comic book character, has a plan for everything, and he's looking forward, and before he gets in a situation, he knows how he's going to get out of that situation, and if the comic book argument, like Batman people, like their answer is literally how would he do that? Because he's Batman. Like, you like,
who would win in a fight?
Who would win in a fight? Batman or the Hulk? Like, Hulk would destroy him easily.
He's just a guy in a suit.
But Batman people like, oh no, he would know that you would need this or you would need this. Like the who would win, Batman or Superman? Superman obviously would win, but Batman people like, no, Batman would win because he would have a kryptonite this or he would have that or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that forethought and that idea is why I put Batman as representing the father side of things, because if he is the one with the plan and he's the one guiding the people, and while Superman is like kind of seen as leader, I think within the Justice League, Batman is often seen as that leader because of these plans, because of the contingency, because of the stuff that he would like to do. So that's what I'm going to say. Long-winded, Batman father, Superman son, Wonder Woman spirit.
Okay. Yeah, I also like the Wonder Woman as the spirit because, like you mentioned, the spirit is depicted in Scripture both as this image of peace, the comforter, the advocate, descends as a dove, and yet also comes in fire, right? And there's this power that comes with the spirit, and I think that's a pretty good depiction of Wonder Woman, right? That she is a warrior for peace, is kind of an ambassador for peace who also kicks a lot of butt. So you're getting that tension there with her, and also there's a tradition of seeing the Spirit as feminine. The word for Spirit in both Greek and Hebrew is a feminine word, and so you can find people that will refer to the Spirit as she. And so if you're going to use the gender side of it, then she more naturally would fit in there. And yeah, like we said, Jesus or Superman as a Christ figure is so common that it's almost kind of overdone. I would say pretty overdone at this point. But yeah, you can see the appeal of he's not human, but he lives among humans, and was sent by his Father, and that he's a figure that you can aspire to. If one of my favorite, one of the best single pages of any comic ever is from All-Star Superman, where there's this girl, or this kid that's going to jump off of a building, and Superman just shows up, and he says, "You're so much stronger than you know," right? And so that his real power is not that he can punch really hard or shoot I-beams, but that he inspires people to be their best, be who they can be. And I see that as a very Christ-like thing as well. But then the problem, I like what you said about, Batman and his foreknowledge, an idea we think of with God, and sometimes thinking of Batman as very stern, like we do with God the Father, which I think is a misrepresentation. And also, Batman has the Bat family, and he also is a father figure. A lot of depictions, especially in movies and things, ignore that whole thing and don't want to use Robin. But if you read any comics, Batman has a family. He is he becomes a father to a lot of people. You could also switch Batman and Superman, kind of like you mentioned, because, Superman is first, right? He was the first superhero. He's kind of the source of this whole genre. And he is more powerful, like God. And so you could put him in that father role. I mean, he is a father now in the comics and in the current series online, or on the CW. And then Batman, as the Christ figure, it makes sense because he's human, right? He doesn't have superpowers. He understands our weakness, like Hebrews says about Christ. And so he is much more in our place, right? You hear people say, and it's kind of not true, that, anybody can be Batman, right? I can't fly, or I don't have a lasso of truth, but I could do what Batman does. Which
if I had $10 billion, right?
Yeah. His superpower is money, which not many people can aspire to what Bruce Wayne can do. But you see that his frailty, and that's I think what appeals to some people. Why some people think Superman is boring is because he has too much power, and so that way, in that sense, Batman fits in that son, the Christ role more.
Just for argument's sake, because both of our lists are very similar, okay? As I'm also sitting here thinking about it, I would like to put Wonder Woman into the Christ spot,
okay,
and Superman into the Spirit spot.
Okay.
Here we go. Both Wonder Woman and Superman, they are creatures from a different world, Themyscira for Wonder Woman. And she was created, and she lived in this place like Jesus, if he's, at heaven, probably not a created being, since
that's also heresy. Yes, I think that's Arianism.
Yes. But here she is, a part of this world, and she leaves her world to better another world.
Yeah.
She's I need to fix this. I need to change it. That's her whole mission, right? Is to leave her people to go be with these other people, to be with man and get them better. And, she is like a warrior for justice, a warrior for peace. And while Christ wasn't a warrior in the sense of, hey, I'm going to rip your head off,
right, yeah.
But
lay down your swords.
But at the same time, whenever he was faced with righteous animosity from the religious leaders, he was very to the point with them. He was very that was the thing that really got him upset, was whenever religious leaders were profiting off of
oppressing the people on the margins.
Yes. And so as Wonder Woman, who would come in, and she could doing those things and being that warrior for justice. And then I'm thinking back to where Christ says, I need to leave so that I can send the Spirit who is more powerful than I am. And if you want to take it from that, while Wonder Woman is powerful and she could hold her own against Superman, she is not Superman level. Like he's the top among, heroes that way. And so I kind of like that, where here comes this guy that is going to do good throughout the entire world, that has more power. I don't know.
Both Christ and the Spirit are sent in that sense, so it works for both Superman and Wonder Woman. And the idea that Superman inspires people. I mean, the word inspires, same root as spirit, right? So he's also performing that same sort of role. So, we're just talking about this to think about the dynamic of the three of them. I haven't read as many Justice League comics as you probably have. And you think about the dynamic between those three, it's not going to be as perfect as we understand in the Trinity of complete harmony. But there is ways that they work together and bring unique things out in each other, and sometimes challenge each other to grow better. I think, as again, a nerd, a big thing for me is to say that Superman and Batman are not enemies; they are friends. Right? They have different outlooks on things sometimes, but they work together. And it's another place where a lot of the movies have, I think, gone wrong. I think the Lego Batman movie did a good job of kind of making fun of this, where Batman says that Superman is his worst enemy to the Joker, and the Joker's like, "No, he's not. You're friends." Right. Like they are not against each other, even though that's such a common thing to want to pit them against each other. And who would win in a fight, right? Just like we talked about in elementary school. Some people seem to never get past that.
Superman, 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah. And I think Wonder Woman also beat Batman pretty bad once. I don't know. I did read that series a few years ago. We're using this example just because Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are called the Trinity. But again, like I said, it's a very common idea in pop culture. So when you think about like a group of three characters, who are some that you think of, and why is that an interesting dynamic?
Yeah, I don't know what it is about three, but it seems to work. In storytelling in general, whenever you have three, because when it's just one and like a 1-2 combo, it's okay. What happens when there's conflict between them? Then what do you do about that? You have written a few down. One that sticks out to me is Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and how they all how they all work together, and even going through. While Harry was the main character of all the books, but like I'm thinking in the second one, whenever Hermione is petrified, and so it's him and Ron, and then in the third one, whenever Ron is hurt, and so Harry and Hermione are the ones that go save the day, and then later in the books, whenever Hermione and Ron split up, and then all this kind of stuff, and how they all...
so it creates new possibilities.
Right.
Of like, okay, we can have these two, and then these two, and then but all three, and you're kind of all are necessary.
And there's that theme in that book of friendship, and how good friendship can always overcome evil, and it also depicts like a real sense of what friendship is, because it does ebb and flow, and we do have animosity or trouble within those relationships. But whenever you kind of have that third leg of the triangle or whatever, that I think there's a reason why we hear things depicted in threes, and then the triangle is the strongest geometrical shape like on the planet. I think that there's a little bit of something to that.
Yeah. And so this dynamic relationship, and again, you see it in lots of places. I thought of like Luke, Han, and Leia from Star Wars, right? The way they interact with each other, and then sometimes they're separate, sometimes they're together. In the X-Men, you have Cyclops and Jean Grey and Wolverine, which again, like there's a lot of times tension between the two of them, and sometimes it's depicted as a love triangle. But I think in the best depictions of those characters, they are actually all working together and just have very different perspectives. I'm definitely a Cyclops fan. I know a lot of people think he's super boring if you only watch the animated series or the movies, but he's a really interesting character. It's a discussion for another time, though. So yeah, but this rule of three, I think the love triangle is probably not the best example of that because that's competitive.
Right.
What we're seeing, and again, thinking about the Christian Trinity and how that's seen in other relationships, it is something of harmony where you're bringing something out of someone else. It's not as simple as just the two people, right? That often becomes dualistic of either this or that. That this is right and that is wrong, right? In our world today, that mindset is, I think, behind a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. And so to have a third perspective, I think, creates a lot more flow and a lot more interest and a deeper conversation and better stories. It is such, like you mentioned, such a common part of stories and even folklore of, three little pigs, three billy goats gruff, right? It's all pointing to this idea that with three, you're doing something special. It's kind of three is a magic number, right? Wasn't that, what was that called? Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
Right? So there you go. I think that's a good stopping place. Three is a magic number. Whether you're talking about Star Wars or the DC Comics or the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. It is something new. It's a mystery that we'll never fully understand. But with this sort of relationship of three, it can always grow and we can always understand it deeper. So as we transition towards our end, one of the segments of our show that we're going to do every week is called Pop Culture Consolations and Desolations. Now, that language comes, as we all know, from St. Ignatius of Loyola and his prayer of examination of consciousness. Okay,
as we all know.
As we all know. So, this prayer is really about looking back through your day and seeing what were positive things where God was at work and you were in tune with the Spirit, and what were moments when you were not. So the consolations are the good things, the desolations are the bad things. So we're just going to use this to talk about what's something that is giving you life from pop culture right now, and what's something that is not, what's something anti-life right now. So Nick, what's a pop culture consolation for you today?
Oh man, I think of a couple of them. The first one is I have just beaten the main story of Horizon Forbidden West on my PlayStation 5.
Okay.
Highly recommend the game. It's a sequel. So if you haven't played the first one, it really does build off of the first one. So I would recommend that one too. They're both fantastic games, a lot of fun, lots of beautiful game. And also The Wilds on Amazon Prime. Second season just came out. If you ever watch the show Lost, it has lots of Losty vibes to it. It's about these teenagers that get stranded on an island, but it's not what it seems.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
Yes. So those would be my consolation.
All right, thanks. My pop culture consolation for today, as we're recording this, tomorrow is a huge release day for music. Kendrick Lamar is dropping his first album since 2017, so that's very anticipated. Who else? The Smile, which is a Radiohead side project, are dropping an album. An artist that one of the new artists I'm really into right now, her name is Ethel Cain. She has an album coming out. And so this is basically what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Now, again, by the time this podcast drops, hopefully everybody will listen to these and hope we'll know whether or not they're all great, but I'm assuming they will be, and looking forward to digging into each of those albums. So yeah, check out Kendrick Lamar, The Smile, and Ethel Cain. So let's move to our pop culture desolations. Anything that you've seen or watched or heard that took life?
Like from a pop culture, I don't have anything negative.
Okay, and that's good. I guess we should say you don't have to have something you hate. We don't want to be haters here. But if there's something that is disappointing, we want to get a chance to complain about it. So yeah, I'll let you take a pass on that.
Thank you.
Mine, I'm gonna avoid spoilers here. We just saw Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and I will just say as vaguely as possible that I was a little bit disappointed in the villain and the motivation for the villain and what the character arc that villain went through. If you've seen it, maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe we can have a spoilery discussion at another time. But I was a little disappointed in the direction that went. Overall, I like the movie pretty well. It's not going to be in like top tier of MCU movies, but it was definitely interesting. Some really fun cameos. But that would be my desolation for this week. Well, as we close our show today, I want to thank you for joining us, but I do want to get real for just a second. Will you be an evangelist for Pop Culture Pastor? Can you spread the good news about what you have heard today by sharing with a friend? Think about a loved one. If they died tonight, what would happen if they didn't know about this podcast? Can you go out? Can you rate and subscribe? It makes a difference. And I may not know whether you like this or whether you gave us 5 stars, but somebody knows. Somebody's watching. All right, well, thanks again for being here. Our theme song is Be Thou My Vision from the 8-Bit Hymnal by Mr. Tyler Larson. You can find him on Spotify and Apple Music and all those fine places. This podcast is edited and produced by me. You are now dismissed. Go in peace.